What's going on, Packer fans? Welcome back to the Pack a Day podcast. I'm your host, Andy Herman. You can follow me on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Today, I wanted to take a look at the best 5 contractual values for the Packers. I promise you, I'm not just going to do listicles for the next, month until Packers training camp gets here. It just happens I wanted to go over these last 3 topics over the last 3 days in specific. So I promise you, I'm not just going to do top 5s for the remainder of the offseason here. But I did want to take a look and just kind of get an idea of which contracts I thought were the best for the Packers, the best absolute values. So I'll go through my 5 today. Before I get there, I want to sort of clarify a couple things here. I'm not looking for players on rookie deals here. Like every player on a rookie deal, for the most part, is going to be on a relatively nice and easy and great contract. So this, anyone who's still on like the exclusive rights free agents, restricted free agency on a rookie contract, I basically eliminated from my consideration. The other thing that I needed to sort of touch base on here is that you need to look at just the full deal. So this is not just a who has the best sort of cap hit this season, right? If we were doing that, Aaron Rodgers at $28.5 million for this season, Kenny Clark at $9.9 million this season, Adrian Amos at $7.2 million, Jair Alexander at $7.1, Aaron Jones at $5.9, all of them in some capacity could be considered for like some of the best values and contracts on the team. But if you take a look at Rodgers and Clark and Amos and Alexander and Jones, all of them have future cap hits or dead money in future years that have to be taken account for there as well. So for that reason, that group of players did not specifically make this list. So without further ado, let me get to the 5 best contracts that I believe the Packers have that, again, are not on current rookie deals or restricted free agent deals, those sort of things. So number 1 on my list is Rasul Douglas. And remember, he just signed a 3-year, $21 million deal. And there's so much about this contract that I love. First of all, every indication so far, and I know it's just OTAs and I know it's just mini camps, but he looks great. He looks fantastic. It doesn't look like there's any slowdown. It doesn't look like there's going to be any sort of, fluke season from a year ago. Partially here, Green Bay is paying and getting a bit of a premium price simply because, it was just basically a 12-game period for Rasul Douglas, and he had not had success in his career up until that point. So there's sort of a middle ground here. Rasul Douglas is getting a little bit less because he needs to prove it over a longer period of time. All of those things sort of make sense, but if they get the Rasul Douglas that they saw a season ago, and all indications right now are that's exactly what they're going to get, they're already considering a move into slot for him so he can get that playing time in base defenses on early downs, probably move outside with maybe Jair Alexander moving inside on obvious passing downs. The fact that he's going to have that versatility, he's incredibly smart, he works incredibly hard. The tape study is apparently off the charts for Douglas, and now all of a sudden you're getting a legitimate starting cornerback on a 3-year, $21 million deal. And the great part about it, he only makes $3.3 million this season, only $6.7 million next year. And then in his 3rd year, they basically have what I would consider a team option, meaning they can pay him $10.7 million for the 3rd year of his deal, which if he lives up to it, great. By that time, $10.7 million for a starting cornerback will look like super cheap at that time. If he's not living up to expectations, they can release him and only have a $1.7 million cap hit and save $9 million on their salary cap that year. So it basically is either going to be basically like a 2-year, $12 million deal at $6 million per year, or you can have the full 3 years, $21 million at $7 million per year. And there's a lot of great options there for Green Bay. Even if year 3, he's not quite living up to that expectation of $10.7 million, but there's still value there. They can probably look at a restructure, maybe extending his contract at that point. So love this deal for Green Bay. Believe that he is already on a great team-friendly deal, even though he just signed it recently. 3 years, $21 million for a starting caliber corner is nothing. And again, I can't say enough about what I think of this deal for Green Bay. I think Douglas and his agent did well too. Again, when you're coming off of just a 12-game stretch, you're not going to get a huge payday when you hadn't had the success prior to that. But it seems like Green Bay and Douglas are a perfect match for each other. And they were able to work out a deal that's beneficial to both, and I really love this deal for the Packers. Next up is a player with a similar sort of story, and that's Devondre Campbell. Struggled at times throughout his career, wasn't the same player, or wasn't the player that I think, both the Cardinals and the Falcons had expected him to be. Gets to Green Bay and all of a sudden immediately becomes a first-team All-Pro player. And again, Green Bay gets a bit of a premium here because, again, Campbell only had the 1 year of success, but that 1 year was really darn good. And like Douglas, it just felt like Campbell and the Packers were a perfect fit for one another. And they both found, Campbell found his home, right? He found exactly where he was supposed to be, in the right defense, in the right spot for his skill set. And this seems like a perfect match. Now, he just signed a 5-year, $50 million deal, which he is a little bit older. So that would take him into, his age 33. So there is a slight amount of risk with that, but $10 million per year over 5 years for a player who just finished as a first team All-Pro linebacker. And more importantly, even if he doesn't make it to the last couple of years of his deal, this really basically boils down to more of a 3-year, $32.2 million deal. So about 11 mil per season, but you get him through probably the 3 prime years left of his career, 29, 30, and 31, and then can make ultimately a decision after that. So that's what I really like about this deal for Devondre Campbell. And over the next 2 years, when Green Bay is really competing probably for a Super Bowl with Aaron Rodgers over these next 2 years, it equates to a 2-year, $12.5 million deal. So he's not making a ton where Green Bay is really trying to make this stretch run and trying to be the best team they can possibly be with Aaron Rodgers as quarterback. Green Bay gets their first team All-Pro. It's a perfect match. It's not an exorbitant deal. If you need to get out of the deal early, that you can. And that sort of deal for a team that has really struggled to find linebackers, and now also a player who can be a mentor for Quay Walker in the time being, it just is a perfect fit. I love that contract, and I think it's a great value for Green Bay. Next up on my list, number 3 is Keyshawn Nixon. And this might be jumping the gun just a little bit because we probably need to see a little bit more out of Nixon in preseason and training camp and once the actual season starts. But all indications are that Keyshawn Nixon is going to be the Packers' number 4 corner and have a key role on the Packers' special teams this upcoming season. If that's the case, his 1 year, $965,000 deal will be pennies on the dollar for what they could get on a return on investment there for Nixon. It's basically a minimum type of deal, extremely minimal risk. Almost no matter what will be one of their core special teams players. So there's value in that itself. But if he can become a legitimate corner and actually get playing time and be a decent player, you are robbing, the bank at that point and getting a huge steal for a player that is providing that level of value to you at under $1 million for a season. And let's not forget, this is a player who just turned 25 years old, already has 3 years of NFL experience under his belt, showed out in the slot in his 2 games where he got legitimate slot playing time this last year with the Raiders, understands Rich Bisaccia and what he wants from special teams. There's a lot to like here. And at 1 year, $965,000, it just feels like such a great deal for Green Bay. Yes, he's going to have to play well. Yes, there's going to be more to this once the pads come on and once the regular season starts and what he can actually provide to this team. But if he becomes their true number 4 corner and can play like he has already in OTAs and mini camps, this could be one of the real steals of the offseason at under $1 million for this season for Keyshawn Nixon on his 1 year deal. If anything, maybe Green Bay is regretting not signing him to a 2 or 3 year deal, trying to lock him up for a little bit longer. All right, next up on my list is Robert Tonyan. Now, I just talked a lot about Robert Tonyan yesterday, so I'm not going to go into great detail. If you haven't checked out that episode, make sure to do so. It's 5 Packers that you don't want to sleep on this season, and I think a lot of people are still sleeping on Robert Tonyan. But you look at a team that is going to be in need of playmakers in the middle of the field, of red zone threats, and players that Aaron Rodgers feels very comfortable with, and Robert Tonyan checks all 3 of those boxes. Had he been healthy, you're probably looking at a player who got, like a 3-year, like a 3-year 30 is probably not out of the question. Maybe at least a 3-year 27, 3-year 24 at minimum. I think that type of deal, if he stayed healthy and performed well last season, which I think a lot of people were expecting him to. Instead, he's coming off the ACL injury, and Green Bay gets him from a cap hit standpoint at 1 year less than $3 million. For comparison's sake, this offseason, Durham Smythe signed for 2 years, $7 million. So $3.5 million per season over 2 seasons. Tonyan was less than that. Tyler Conklin, not a bad player, but Tyler Conklin, 3 years, $20 million. All right. So Tonyan clearly, had he been healthy this last season, in my opinion, would have received a much better contract, or at least a better contract, at least bare minimum the same contract that Tyler Conklin got at 3 years, $20 million. And that's almost $7 million per season. Green Bay gets him at 1 year under $3 million. Now, of course, there's some caveats here. You don't know exactly when he's going to come back. He's coming off a torn ACL, so what type of player is he going to be? But if come playoff time or, a little bit before that, if he gets back to playing close to what he was playing at prior to his injury, this deal still will be a steal for Green Bay. And even if you don't get him for the full season, I still think that Green Bay gets great value on their investment with Robert Tonyan, and they still keep him in tow. So if he does have a great season, hopefully you can begin, contract negotiations of keeping him on the roster in some capacity, for the foreseeable future as well. So love that deal for Green Bay and think it could ultimately be a steal. And then last but not least, number 5 on my list, Sammy Watkins, 1 year, $1.8 million in cap hit. And once again, if we look comparatively speaking to some of the other wide receivers who received deals this offseason, Mac Hollins, 1 year, $2 million. Cam Sims, 1 year, $2.6 million. Byron Pringle for the Bears. And I actually like Byron Pringle, but 1 year, $4.125 million for Byron Pringle. So some wide receivers with less of a pedigree. I'm not saying that they maybe can't outperform Sammy Watkins, but getting a much larger contract than what, or at least a larger contract than what Sammy Watkins received this offseason. And it would have been one thing if, we were originally reading into this that, all right, maybe Sammy Watkins is going to have to earn his job on this team and maybe he's not guaranteed a spot. That's out the window. Matt LaFleur not only is basically guaranteed a spot, but said he is going to have a major role within this offense. Aaron Rodgers has gone out of his way to say, how much of a role he thinks that Sammy Watkins is going to have. Sammy Watkins looks like a true starting wide receiver on this team. Former first-round pick. Yes, in order to pay this off, he needs to stay healthy, and he has not always stayed healthy. He needs to be better than he has in Buffalo and Kansas City. If not, then Green Bay may not get the investment that they're hoping for here. But I still think the overall investment that they're putting in, $1.8 million, is more than worth the risk here. And I think they could get a massive payoff if Watkins can get back to form or even exceed the form that he's been at in recent seasons. And Watkins gone out of his way to say that he hasn't played up to his standard and he's putting a lot into this upcoming season. So those are my 5 best values for Green Bay, taking out of consideration rookies or players on restricted free agent deals that are still basically on their rookie contract structures. And again, taking into consideration the full length of the deal and not just their salary cap hit this season. Number 1, Rasul Douglas. Number 2, Devondre Campbell. Number 3, Keyshawn Nixon. Number 4, Robert Tonyan. And number 5, Sammy Watkins. That does it for me today. I'll be right back here tomorrow with an all-new episode. But until next time, and as always, go Pack Go.